Welcome, everybody, to today's Building My Legacy podcast. I have with me today Janine Wirth. She is a coach who works with people who've experienced trauma and want to get rid of it, because what she's found is trauma, whenever it occurs, if we don't deal with it, it comes back to haunt us. And as we're looking at our legacy, what we want to leave behind, those of us who've maybe experienced some trauma, we may be impacted in terms of that next step by the past, or we work with people who are in that zone and have that experience and really would love some way of dealing with it. So Janine, if you would introduce yourself to the audience, let people know what brought you to working with trauma and what it is that you do.
Sure. So thank you for having me. Well, as you mentioned, I'm a licensed psychotherapist, a clinical hypnotherapist, and a coach, and I decided to specialize in trauma. I work with women all over the world in my virtual practice. I'm based in Germany. And the reason why I decided to specialize in trauma is because of my own story. I had a traumatic childhood myself, survived a hijacking, kidnapping, and attempted rape at gunpoint at the age of 18. And I just noticed from my own experience with PTSD, having been raised by a mother who experienced trauma herself, that trauma affects every single part of our lives, whether it's your relationships, how well you do in your career, how you parent. There's so many things and facets to trauma that I decided I wanted to work with women. I wanted to make the treatment as accessible as possible. So to work with me, basically all you need is a good internet connection. I have clients all over the world. And to combine traditional therapy, hypnotherapy, and coaching so that we are helping women to heal, but at the same time giving them the tools and skills needed to make sure that they're living a life that has high quality. There's so many people that wake up in the morning and just dread the day ahead of them. And that is an awful place to be at. We don't want that. We want people to get out of bed and feel that they're living a life of purpose, that they have joy, that they, making some sort of impact in the world.
So Janine, you talk about the big T of trauma and the little t of trauma. Talk a little bit about that, what each of them are, what the difference is, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. So in psychology, we refer to big T and little t traumas. And, society, the movies have done a wonderful job of educating people on big T traumas. You'll see movies with war veterans that are experiencing PTSD, or people that have had horrific car accidents, or women that have been abused or attacked. But what a lot of people don't realize is that your mind reacts to little t traumas. So the things that people usually dismiss, things like being bullied at school, having a teacher or a parent that dismisses you or makes you feel not good enough, having emotionally unavailable parents, or a parent with narcissistic tendencies, all of those things can affect us. It affects the way we think about ourselves. It affects the way we show up, all of those things. And most people don't realize that. They just think that it has to be this huge occurrence that will usually get you on the front page of a newspaper for it to actually affect you, or to get to the point where you need to seek help. But what they don't realize is that anything that scares you or shocks you or makes you feel that you're not good enough, your mind actually portrays that as trauma. And when we take on negative beliefs and this starts shaping our behaviors and our choices, these things don't resolve themselves. They usually come back later in life with what I call secondary symptoms, which are things like binge eating, procrastination, fear of success, all these things that can really affect your quality of life. And most people don't make that connection.
So Janine, how do you go about helping people? Because we think of some of the trauma as being very difficult to treat, like PTSD. We think of abuse as being very difficult. I hear also from women in the workplace a sense of sexual discrimination. Sometimes they have been physically abused, but more likely it's been more a demeaning type of experience and being immobilized. So that's quite a range, right? Do you
Yes, it is.
differentiate in how you treat? And traditional therapy often takes years, right? So what's your experience and how do you move people through the experience?
Okay. So first of all, I'm someone who believes that you don't have to spend years in therapy to have a successful outcome. And the longest that I usually work with a patient or a client is 6 months. They cannot book me for longer than 6 months to begin with, because that is the usual time frame in which my clients have these amazing results. And the reason for that is, first of all, the fact that I combine different modalities. You know, in the past, therapy, when people think of therapy, they think of talk therapy. And while that does
Can
have
you
some
explain talk
advantages,
therapy? Because some people may not know what you mean by talk therapy. I'm
talk
assuming
therapy,
that's the traditional come in to the therapist, you sit on the couch and you talk about your problem. Okay.
yes. So that is usually what they show you in the movies, where the person is sitting or lying in the couch with a box of tissues, and the therapist will ask them, well, how do you feel? What do you think about that? And in the past, before we started, experimenting and looking at other modalities like NLP and hypnotherapy, and that used to be the only solution. But we know now that there are so many different ways that we can help the mind cope with these symptoms and also the beliefs that the subconscious mind holds. So when you start asking people, how do you feel? What do you think? Your logical mind will want to give you an answer. What I do, and this is how I can reduce that time so dramatically, is by incorporating clinical hypnosis. Because there, I'm not asking your logical mind what it thinks. I'm asking your subconscious mind to relay events to me. I'm using your subconscious mind to identify the emotions that you haven't processed properly and the residual emotional baggage. So if you, for instance, just as an example, say you were attacked by a dog when you were 6 years old, and that was a really shocking, traumatic experience for you. And you come to me now and you're 35 and you say to me, listen, I've noticed that I have these negative thoughts. I'm doing all these things, but I'm not really seeing success. Or you could have, an eating disorder. People usually know that something is going on that they can't manage by themselves. And what I will do is use regression hypnosis to take her back to that event where she was 6 years old, and she can tell me what 6-year-old her is experiencing. Because as a 35-year-old, she might dismiss that and say, well, that was long ago. Obviously, I was scared. It was a scary thing. But 6-year-old her wasn't mature enough to deal with those emotions, to process all of that. And that is what the subconscious mind holds on to. So once we can identify that and go back to those events, and a lot of people then think, oh my goodness, this is going to be so scary and I'm going to be re-traumatized, but it's not, because we are just like detectives and we're watching this movie and it's like, I'm scared. I feel like maybe this dog is going to kill me or whatever it could be. And we're just identifying that. They don't actually physically relive it. It's not that as a 35-year-old in that session, she can feel the pain of being bitten. And a lot of people think that is how it is, but I promise you it's not. So once we have all of that information, I then give them a way to process that. And then with the coaching, we then start looking at ways and giving them the tools to start taking the actions. Because I always tell my clients, the reason why I combine therapy with coaching is imagine you have a room in your house that you want to renovate. So you have maybe an attic that you want to turn into a home office. But at the moment, it's filled. Everybody who's got a piece of junk has just put it there. Before you can start painting and renovating it, you first have to clear it out. First have to decide what you want to keep, what you need to get rid of. And that's the therapy part. We're looking at beliefs, behaviors, all of these, emotional baggage that you have piled up there, because all of us have some sort of baggage, regardless of how wonderful our childhoods were. And the coaching part is like where you're sending in the painters and the interior decorator. It's a lot easier to decorate if you've cleaned out the room, which is the therapy part.
So, okay, I want to go back to where you began with the unconscious mind and looking at the use of hypnotherapy, because I think many people find that frightening. Will I lose control of my mind? And already I'm struggling to have control of those unconscious feelings and thoughts. So please talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, so first of all, the hypnotherapy that people see in the movies is not clinical hypnotherapy. All right. So I do not make my clients cluck like chickens or anything ridiculous like that. With clinical hypnotherapy, basically, you can think of your brain as having two computers. You have the one that helps you, your logical brain, to decide what are you going to have for lunch today? What are you going to wear today? Are you going to go for a walk? Everything like that. And then you have the second part, which is your subconscious mind. And that is where you can think of it as this giant vault where all of your memories and experiences are filed there. So in hypnotherapy, we go and look at the files, but you are still in control. My clients remember everything. If hypnotherapy was a form of mind control where people did not know what was happening, then everyone would want to be one, because they'll say, give me your online banking details, buy me a Ferrari for my birthday. That is not the reality. So people are in control all the time. And I would always recommend that if people want to do that, that they go to someone who's a clinical hypnotherapist. This is someone who has extensive training, who has ethics, who has passed, board exams, and don't go to, some street performer, because that is not clinical hypnotherapy.
Got it. Okay. So you work with the unconscious mind. And so I'm not clear how you use the unconscious mind, what you as a sleuth discover and work with there, in terms of then how you process and help people take action. So how do you move into that next step of action taking?
Okay. So as I said, your subconscious mind has all these files, every experience that you've ever had, every emotion you've ever felt, every conversation you've ever had, it's filed in your subconscious mind, and we can access that in hypnosis. So when someone says to me, for instance, and I'll give you a real life example, I had someone come to me and say, I have a binge eating habit. I don't know why, but I've noticed that this is one area of my life that I just cannot get under control. So in hypnosis, we were able to go back to the time where she engaged in that behavior for the very first time. And that was often an argument where her father told her, you will never amount to anything. I wish you had never been born. And she wanted to soothe herself, comfort herself. And when she was small, her father happened to be an alcoholic who used to get really violent and, in his drunken rages. When she was a little girl, whenever he had one of these episodes where he would behave like that, her mother would take her and either give her a chocolate or a bowl of ice cream to try and distract her and make her feel better. So in her mind, that food, these, very high sugary foods, were a form of comfort. So when she, in, whatever situation, for instance, her boss She had a very aggressive boss who used to trigger that feeling of not being good enough, the same way her father did. Whenever that happened, she would then reach for a sugary, very fast, make yourself feel better treat. So she would drive through McDonald's and pick up, an ice cream, or she would drive to her local shop, buy 5 chocolate bars and eat them in her car to try and recreate that sensation of comfort that her mother provided her with. So once she knew that, and we knew that her not feeling good enough was a trigger, and she would then try and comfort herself like that. Once she knew that, it became a pattern that was very easy to break, because she could identify, okay, my boss has now made me feel good enough. The truth is, I know that I'm enough. He obviously has issues. How can I make myself feel better? And to teach her coping mechanisms that were not harmful, self-care, yoga, exercising, journaling, things like that, where she could then identify, observe, and change the pattern of behavior.
Got it. So when you do this and you're working with people, resistance, do you find resistance, or is the trauma, the pain strong enough by the time they come that they don't care? Just make it go away.
I have never had a client that has not gone into hypnosis. And the reason for that is because they are in control.
Yeah.
Hypnosis is basically, you can imagine if we were in the car, you are the driver and I'm the sat nav. I'm just guiding the person to get into that state, but they are allowing that. So when we do that, I have their trust and they want that. So in that form, there's never any resistance. If I had to try and hypnotize someone against their will, then maybe there could be. I don't know. I've never done it against anyone's will. They usually come to me, pay me, and tell me, I want you to help me. So all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. I always tell people, if you imagine, if people take the same route to work, for 5 years, every single day they're driving that exact same route, there will be days where they'll arrive at their destination and they can't actually remember the drive there, but they got there. And that is the first lightest form of self-hypnosis. So our minds are very powerful and we are absolutely in control of that process.
So as you work with people and you think about what you do, the biggest challenges that people have in moving past, letting go, they're their biggest challenges.
I think the biggest challenges, or the things that people come to me for, the root causes of that, a lot of it has to do with a fear of rejection and not feeling good enough. A lot of times, even imposter syndrome can be connected to that fear of not being good enough. Because if you look at toddlers, they are the perfect example. If you look at a 2 or 3-year-old, they think that they are, the fastest runners, the best singers. They think that they can just do everything the absolute best. And we're all born like this, with this amazing self-confidence and self-belief, until the world teaches us otherwise, until we have a parent or a teacher or a classmate or a colleague or a partner that makes us feel that we are not good enough. So the symptoms might look a bit different, but very often that is one of the main root causes that causes these problems. People simply not believing and feeling that they are worthy. And when you feel that you are not worth more, you can imagine how that affects your life, the choices that you make, the partners that you end up in relationships with. If you grow up with a dad that makes you feel that you're not good enough or that treats you badly, there's a really good chance that women repeat that pattern and their first partners are people that treat them the same way, because the mind loves what is familiar, and that behavior, that rhetoric, that conversation is very familiar to them.
So as you work with people, not just people in general, not clients, what do you tell people are things they should watch for, cues that they should be attentive to that tell them, you know what, life would be much simpler if you went and sought some help now. What are those things that you would observe early on that are pre you?
Okay. So that could be, negative thoughts when people wake up and, they have a lot of self-criticism. The thoughts that we have every day, if most of them are negative, if you do something and the first thing that comes to mind is, oh, I'm so stupid. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said that. Why did I do that again? That's usually a sign that your mindset needs work and that you have some negative beliefs playing out there. Any self-harming behaviors, we obviously want to seek help immediately. If you are cutting yourself, if you are using drugs or alcohol to cope with the situations in your life, or binge eating, starving yourself, these are all very harmful behaviors that people use as coping mechanisms. And if you just feel, that everything is this major mission, that life is so hard, there's a good chance that you are fighting with your own subconscious mind every day. And that takes a lot of mental energy. One of the first things that my clients always tell me after we start working together is, I have so much energy. I'm waking up before my alarm goes off. I am doing more. One of my clients said to me after we worked together that she was doing more in a week than she had in 3 months, because she had gotten to the point where she had so much fatigue and mental stress that grocery shopping felt like a marathon to her.
It's amazing. It is amazing, isn't it? And I think we value our mental health. We don't always seek it for ourselves because somehow we think we'll overcome. Or I think it's also what you talked about. We don't feel good enough. We're worthy of getting the help so we can feel good. And so seeking it out can be very tough. We're almost done with our time, Janine. Things that you think that we've left out that you would like people to know about, to think about, that would be helpful.
Well, I want everyone that is listening to this or watching this to know that it doesn't matter where you started out in life. You can make all these negative experiences that you've had just one page of your story, and to consciously create the chapters going forward. Because for me, that's the difference between a victim and a survivor. I hate it when people use the word victim because it implies that the person is damaged or can't recover. And that's not true. Survivors have overcome these experiences, and some of them are really awful experiences, but they have still managed to make the best of their lives. These are people that very often go into the healing arts, or people that use their story and their experiences to try and create impact in the world. So there's just one decision that differentiates between victim and survivor, and it's choosing to heal yourself. That's it.
Well, on that note, Janine, what a beautiful ending. The only thing that differentiates is the desire, the choice to heal yourself. And it is a choice, isn't it? And there isn't a human being that doesn't have something to heal. And so just thinking about that is really lovely. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Janine, for being with us today and with our audience on Building My Legacy podcast. And for those of you who are listening, please visit our website, buildtomorrow.com with the number 2, and also our social media channels, buildtomorrow.com. And we will have information about Janine and how to contact her in our show notes, so that you are welcome to get in touch with her and to learn more from her if you would like. And if you have any trouble or would like help in getting in touch with her, let us know. We'll be glad to help. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for watching my video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell button above. Leave comments. We'd love to hear what you think. And visit our other social media links as well. Thanks much.